Hello, and welcome to my channel. In today's video, I'll be talking about how I accidentally became a Juggalo and why Carl Jung is my celebrity crush. Okay, so how I accidentally became a Juggalo. Yeah, you can tell by the outfit today, it's Homestuck. So someone commented and said like, oh, are you a fan of Insane Clown Posse? I was like, no. But like, wait, actually kind of. But only like as an in-joke to Homestuck, this webcomic that I sort of kind of read, which I didn't even read that much of it, honestly. But it just got me thinking about how like this sort of mimetic absorption of ideas where you think it's like a joke, but then it's like it actually influences you so much. Yeah, because now I'm dressing up like a goth clown all the time, so I guess Insane Clown Posse really did influence me. And you know, this has very negative consequences sometimes. You see people and they're like, oh, it's just a joke, it's just a meme. Like, you don't understand, like, it's actually forming your reality, so be very careful about the memes that you're consuming and making, putting out there in the world. And okay, my celebrity crush is Carl Jung. Like, you might not understand this if you look it up and you see, like, a picture of him and you're like, oh, I don't really get it. Yeah, because that's, like, him as an old man. Like, no, I don't like dirty old men either. You need to find, like, a picture of him when he was, like, young and hot, and, like, you'll understand why he had so many women, like, chasing him. Because there's something about, like, I don't know, maybe it's like the smirk or something. I feel like I have a bit of a smirk too. But there's just something where, you know, I look at him and I was like, you know, if he was my psychoanalyst, like, he could have fixed me, honestly. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about Jung, like, as a person, and then his ideas as well. Because, you know, obviously connected but separate. So, as a person, I mean, I think he was very flawed. So it's like, it's kind of strange to, like, give relationship advice from a Jungian perspective when it's like the man himself was like, you know, he did not treat his wife all that well. I mean, maybe she was kind of okay with it. Maybe the arrangement worked out. Some people would argue that Carl Jung was a guru, but I'm not certain that I agree with this. Mostly because I'm such a fangirl that I'm a little bit in denial. I think if you look at the definition of a guru, it's definitely true. And especially because he had this kind of religious persona of being like, people consider him the father of the New Age, and it really is because of this cult of personality that he was able to create around himself and his ideas, and sort of this way of speaking in this pseudo-religious sort of way. But I think it's really interesting because I feel like a lot of what I'm getting from that is like from the Red Book of seeing him as a sort of religious figure, or like Liber Novus. But the thing is, that wasn't actually released until rather recently, so it's just interesting to me because it's like I came to his work after already knowing all of this stuff. Like, it would have been crazy to be like a Jungian scholar, and then when the Red Book dropped, like, it kind of would have changed your whole perspective on things. I think that obviously, like, you can attribute very negative qualities to being a guru. Like, obviously they abuse their power and like sleep with their followers and that sort of thing. Like, that's not so good. But like, being able to form a cult of personality is really impressive, and like to have a school of thought that you have created. And it's like you're literally just taking other people's ideas and then reshaping them and repackaging them, but that it could be something completely new, or that you could use it to influence other people. Like, for example, my favorite contemporary guru is Teal Swan, and she has this process called the completion process. You know, so that's like, if you're a guru, you need to invent some sort of school of thought or some sort of process. But if you actually look at it, like, she claims to have invented it, but it's like, I've read like this exact thing, just like worded a little bit differently in so many other like spiritual New Age texts, or like a therapeutic text. And like, it's interesting because her therapist was Barbara Snow, who's like honestly like a goat herself. Like, I mean, perhaps she's a little bit controversial, but like the impact that she's had is just crazy. So it's like she's studied under, like, she has this lineage, and obviously she's read so many books about this sort of New Age stuff to be able to adopt this guru personality and sort of have her own method and that sort of thing. So I find that very inspiring. And my story about how I came to Jungian psychology, I first heard about Jungian theory when I watched the movie Persona in about 7th grade. And honestly, I didn't really understand it that much. And like, it was funny because how I found it is I started getting into movies for the first time, and so I was on IMDb looking at lists of like top 20 craziest mindfuck movies, you know, like what a 13-year-old does. And then I happened to find the movie Persona and then watched it, and I was like, huh, interesting. But yeah, I didn't really understand it at all. So now I think it would be interesting to return to actually knowing a little bit about Jungian psychology. And then also in high school, I was introduced to it because we studied Robertson Davies. He wrote the Deptford trilogy, and he said it was like an explicitly Jungian novel, or trilogy. But it was funny because the way that my teacher taught it, it was like this mishmash of like Freudian and Jungian terms, and like it just wasn't taught very well. And at the time, it was so confusing, and I thought it was just like, oh, I'm too stupid to understand this stuff. Like, yeah, probably a high schooler is not understanding like the depth of this sort of psychology anyway. But it was actually because she taught it in such like a convoluted and like misunderstood way. So it wasn't the best introduction, I would say. And then I also got Man and His Symbols when I was in high school, so that was like my first introduction to it. And then more recently, I started getting into like more commentary on Jung, or like other Jungian authors. Like I prefer reading Mary Louise von Forence to reading Carl Jung. I think she just like she writes a little more clearly, and this is not at all a controversial opinion. I think that a lot of like scholars on Jungian thought would agree with this. And also like the concept of like Jungian thought, Jungian psychology. Like obviously it's named after him, and he came up with a lot of it and all this, and he put together this group of authors that have shaped Jungian theory. He's also working in a tradition that has gone on for long before him, and like the concept of symbolic thinking and like archetypes, although he really brought that into sort of mainstream consciousness and like culturally in the West, he's very prominent for this sort of thing. Like obviously those ideas had existed for thousands of years, so like when one talks about Jungian thought, it's separate from just like Carl Jung as a person, because I feel like sometimes when you talk about like Jungian theory, people will try and attack it and be like, well, Carl Jung had all these flaws, and it's like, well, it's like that's just what it's named. We just refer to it as Jungian, but it's so much larger than that. He's also influenced a lot of artwork in our society. I think that like the Jungian approach to therapy appeals a lot more to artists than other types of therapy. So if you're someone who's been in therapy a lot, like talk therapy, and it just isn't working for you, I would definitely recommend trying to find a Jungian analyst, because things like dream analysis or analyzing your artwork, it works better with your brain. And it also integrates more aspects of like Eastern esotericism with the Western esotericism, instead of just this sort of exclusively Western, really like rigidly scientific approach to therapy, which I think probably is not going to work for many artists or people with more of an artistic brain, you might say. There are other books that are like explicitly Jungian. Like I believe that Hermann Hesse's Steppenwolf was actually based on his experiences going through psychoanalysis. And a lot of other work has been influenced by his ideas, maybe not quite so directly through people who have gone through psychoanalysis, but just sort of in these concepts of archetypal thinking, or like definitely the trickster archetype, I feel like was very much popularized by him. I mean, like, so that's why something like Homestuck, like, I don't actually know, because I never actually finished reading it, but I feel like there was some Jungian stuff in there, like probably a lot about Gnosticism as well, just like it's blending together a lot of influences. Like at the end of the day, we are our influences. And another one, recently I was playing Balatro, like the poker game. I started playing it and I got so addicted to it, and then I was like, wait, like it's not just the actual gameplay, but the theme of it is so interesting. Like it's very much it's very esoteric, of course, because you've got things like tarot cards in there, and I think there's like an explicit reference to Jung, because they have like the red card or red joker, so it's like the red book, but I'm not certain about that. Maybe I'm reaching a little bit on that one. And even if you're not so familiar with Jungian ideas, because it's in so much pop culture, you'll definitely have absorbed a lot of it. Like if you've ever heard of this Myers-Briggs personality type thing, like that was based on Jungian concepts. And actually it's funny because Jung and I are like the same personality type, so I think maybe that's partly why I'm so drawn to him. And yeah, recently I've just been reflecting a lot on the influences that really shaped me, particularly around the sort of moving into being a teenager, and like those are like very formative years. So I think it's quite important to reflect on those influences, because you probably don't realize how much that they've actually impacted you in your work. Like for example with the Homestuck thing, like I think everyone thinks that Homestuck is just a phase, and then they get older and then they come back to it and they're like, wait, no, it's actually cool. Like I'm sorry for pretending that Homestuck was not cool, because I was betraying my true self there. And on the trickster archetype, it's interesting, yeah, because it is like Insane Clown Posse, they're like the goth clowns, right? So it's like the trickster, and then in Homestuck it's like the trolls, right? In Balatro, obviously it's like jokers. So obviously the trickster archetype is something that really appeals to me. And I'm not certain why exactly. Like I guess because the trickster, it is entertainment, and like even when it's comedic, it still has like some sort of truth to it, and there's some sort of lesson in it. And I think that like it's interesting to see how one can be misled by a trickster. I mean, that's the whole essence of it, is that you think it's one thing, but it's really something else. And you think it's not that serious. You think it's just a joke, but it's actually quite deep. So the trickster archetype, yeah. I thought I was over it. I really did. I thought I was done with this clown business, but I feel like I just keep coming back to it. So maybe I still need to work on that a little bit. So I think that if you like are not familiar with Jung, like I would kind of honestly be surprised if you're watching this video and you're not familiar with him at all. But I would definitely recommend like studying a little bit of it, if it's something that appeals to you, because it can actually like, no, I feel like I'm being a shill for the Jungian analysis process, but it actually is true that like it could be very transformative. And like this is why I feel like I got like I'm actually getting scammed, because like, so like, you know, all these new agers, and they're like, oh, you have to buy my course for my process, and then you'll have all your problems in your life fixed. So I'm reading all these Jungian books, and all of them say like you can't understand analysis unless you actually go through it yourself. And it's like I just had like a purely intellectual interest in it, but then they're saying you won't understand it at all unless you go through analysis. And then it's like, well, okay, now I gotta find a certified Jungian analyst, and it's like so expensive. But because I want to have the intellectual understanding, I feel like I have to go through it, but it actually is kind of a transformative process, honestly. And so I kind of would recommend it if you're interested in it. I mean, like if you're already paying for talk therapy anyway, you might as well choose like a talk therapy that appeals to your interests, instead of one that's just like some generic, like you go to a counselor and you're like, oh, I'm feeling sad, and they just like match you with whoever. Well, thank you for watching this video, and I hope that it was a little bit interesting to you. And if you have thoughts on this topic, please let me know, because I feel like I know a lot of people who are interested in Jungian theory from like the intellectual level, but they don't have this like borderline on the spectrum obsession and like fangirling over all the characters. My number one fandom is like Jungian analysts. So if you can relate to that, please let me know, because I would love to talk more about this. Anyway, thank you for watching.